Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I'm Jason, a guy who kind of was in a recovery house at one point.
And I'm Billy. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
My name's John, and I'm an addict who's been in every single halfway house in Delaware and Maryland, just about.
And if you haven't guessed, today we're going to talk about recovery houses, whether they're useful, what they're like, if there's any standard, if they follow a similar guideline to each other, and that's what John here's for. So we're gonna let John go ahead and tell us a little bit about himself.
My name's John Mcgee. I'm an addict. Was born an addict, and I got almost 10 months now. I've been in almost every recovery house around, and I stopped doing drugs and my life got better, basically. I'm a chronic relapser. I grew up in Delaware, and I came out to Maryland 5 years ago and did the halfway house tour. So, yeah, that's that. That's who I am, I guess. Crackhead, dopehead, did it all. Addicted to more. And I did anything to make me not feel or to feel. So, yeah.
So how did you find out about recovery? Like, what's been the normal routine? Like, is it go to treatment, get out of treatment, go to a recovery house, and then progress on? That seems to be the logical path for most people.
I didn't find out about recovery or rehab or any of that until I went to jail. So I got locked up in CCDC in Elkton. And when I was in there, for a good time, I started taking these classes, and I met a guy in there who was bringing classes in. And when I got out, he let me come over. He let me sleep at his house for 5 days until I got into a halfway house, my first one in Elkton, Maryland.
Yeah. Now, when you say classes, you mean like meeting, like NA meetings?
It
or
was
it
not
actual drug
NA
classes?
meetings. There was some kind of drug class brought in by the health department, and it was
So useless.
It was a real fucking joke.
Yeah.
Well,
Because I did a lot of H&I in jails, and we would come in and they would say, NA classes are now being held in the cafeteria, and I would always just feel like, we're not fucking classes. Like, I'm not here to teach anybody anything.
When I used to work at a place in like a manufacturing plant, and there was another guy in there that was in NA, and the people there would always ask him, like, you still in them classes? And I'm like, I never understood the classes.
Like you're going to graduate or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? I get a diploma.
So what was your first recovery house like? What was that experience, and did it seem like it was helpful?
So my first one, I got out of CCDC, and I moved into a house called Solutions that doesn't exist anymore. And
So they were not the solution. Misnomer.
We called ourselves the Solution Boys.
Oh.
And because we had the solution, and I relapsed.
So how, going back to what was like that, you said that was your first introduction to recovery. How long ago was that?
I stayed there for about I want to say 2 months, and I got kicked out clean, honestly, for being late. Now, it seems like each halfway house has certain rules and regulations, and there's like different grades to them. This one had a curfew. You had to go to so many meetings. You had a house meeting at the end of the week, and I think it was a good house. I mean, it really depends on the people in it. Honestly, if you get like a good house with people that are serious about recovery and are serious about changing their lives, I'm a big supporter of like, you are who you hang out with. And if you put yourself around good people, you will become a good person, even if you're a piece of shit like me. And that's basically how I got to where I am today. Not saying that I'm not a piece of shit, but I'm a better piece of shit than I was 4 years ago.
I'm not a dry, dusty piece of shit. I'm a little fresher. It's solid.
Well, and you mentioned different levels and things. So from what I understand, there are There's recovery housing, which is based on like addiction recovery. It usually has some sort of
House manager,
yeah,
stuff
and like
that.
rules and regulations about whatever, how many meetings you should go to or what recovery you're doing. Then there are halfway houses, which are, I guess, a little different. They aren't always based around recovery, so they don't necessarily require you to go to certain amounts of meetings and things like that. And then there are 3/4 way houses, which are even a level looser than that. Probably almost more like what you described where you were, is where you're just almost like a roommate. You're expected to sort of take care of yourself and manage most of your life on your own.
Correct. And I have lived in every one of them. The 3/4 so I went to Solutions, and then I ended up in an Oxford house. And that's a 3/4 house. We manage ourselves. There's no house manager. We pay our rent. We meet up once a week, and we discuss our bills. We pay everything, but we still drug test each other, and we hold each other accountable. Now, for that, like, that worked for me for a very long time, just because the way my work schedule is and the kind of personality I am. Like, I want freedom, but I still need someone to hold me accountable at the end of the day, and that did that for me for a long time. And if you want to get high in those houses, like, there's ways. There's if you want to get high, you're gonna get high no matter what. You gotta want it. And but I had a lot of fun in those Oxford houses. A lot of fun. You know, you got this. You were able to, like, go sleep somewhere 2 nights a week. You're able to have people come over into your room, and they could sleep over for a night or two during the week. And I ran with that.
Yeah, and from what I understand of 3/4 houses, like, you're more, the rules aren't necessarily governed. It's more the group of people that are in the house kind of decide if behaviors are okay or not okay.
We vote,
right, where you can, like, if you can have these sleepovers or whatever, or if you can have people stay there. Like, it's kind of really up to the group of people at the house.
Yes.
All in favor of John getting laid tonight? Like, what?
Right.
Basically.
That's basically. Yeah. So that's where they
I've
can
been
go
voted
wrong.
against that. Like, they were like,
Really?
no women for John for at least 60 days.
Wow.
Yeah, because
You didn't live by that, did you?
I did for a little bit. But yeah,
60 minutes.
I just went over to the Mommy and Me house. It was right down the street.
Yeah.
They call it the Mommy and Mcgee house,
So that's a
honestly.
women's house.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
a women's house.
Mommy and Me. Oh boy.
McGee and Me.
The MILF house.
Yeah. So you mentioned, like you said, you came out of jail and went to a recovery house.
Yeah, I came out of jail and was a straight animal. Like, I would introduce myself as Johnny the Dumpster. Like, I didn't know how to live. I was using drugs since I was 15, and I was raised by addicts. So it was like my whole life was getting high. I mean, or manipulation and all that. I never had any real role models. So, like, when I was 10 years old, I was like, I want to be like the people around me, and I want to get high. I want to, you know, and it took me to going to these halfway houses and meeting people that had actual long-term goals and stuff like that to realize what I really wanted in life. And these halfway houses helped build me to what I am today. Not saying that I'm great or anything, but I'm not getting high, you know, and I feel like I'm somewhat of a good person.
Well, and I guess the idea is they help with the recidivism, you know.
They introduce you back into society. You know, like paying bills, like that's a normal thing for normal people. But us living on the streets, getting high with a book bag, you know, I have a skill set. Like, I can ruin my whole life with $20. Like, I'm really good at it. I can use $20 and be homeless in 10 minutes, like, and go survive in the city with a book bag. And, like, going to a place where there was rules, where I've never had rules my whole life. Like, I could smoke weed at 13 in my house as I was watching TV. Like, it was nothing. You know, at 15, I was smoking crack with my mom. Like, I never had any rules. So I moved in these houses, and they're like, I'm 32 years old, and they're like, you got to be home by 10 o'clock. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I got to, what?
Well, and also it's men or other people that have been through similar situations to you. They've been in and out of jail. They've been used and they've been homeless on the street.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's and I
No,
hate
it's just
not
not
to bash
against
churches,
me.
but it's not like it's a church or somebody else telling you these rules. Like it's other recovering people.
It's people that have 2 years clean, that are watching me saying, you got to be home at this time. And I'm like, fuck. And they're like, it works for me, and it's the truth, I just followed the rules as best I could until I got kicked out of most of them.
Right. Now, how about like paying rent? Like, were you able to pay rent right away, or do they make you pay right away?
I had funding through different corporations, I guess, or whatever, outreach places. Voices of Hope being one of them, paid my rent once or twice. There's all different kinds. RCA, ACR.
ACR, yeah.
ACR, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, places like this would pay my rent until I could find a job and get on my own feet. And that was a big thing. Like, I feel like with these houses, like, you go in and you're broken, you don't have anything, and you get the funding, and you just try to get a job as fast as you can. And I'm lucky with that because I have a trade. And you just start saving up money. You start accumulating things, accumulating time away from drugs. And so when the funding runs out, you have a little bit of money put to the side so you can pay your rent. And I would suggest stay there for a year. And if you can, stay out of relationships. And
is that really a thing?
When I first came around, I didn't think it was. I was like, fuck these guys, I'm gonna get laid, and then I fell in love with the wrong person. And I thought I was the worst addict in the world until I met her.
Well then.
And
they do say water seeks its own level. So.
Sick is sick. And so save up the money and then work on yourself. Wait and see before you move out. Make sure you got like a year clean. You have a car. You have everything you need, and you have enough money to buy your apartment and still have money left over, so you're not struggling when you get out. This is like the time to rebuild your life. Or rebuild or build. Like with me, I had to build one because I never had one. So I just stuck around there. Eventually, I became assistant house manager of one of the houses, and I still try to work with the halfway houses today as best I can. Give them rides, or I'm the NA plumber, so I go around and help and do the plumbing in all the recovery houses. So I get to see all the new guys coming in and shit. So,
oh, gotcha. Yeah, so it sounds like for people either coming out of treatment or coming out of being incarcerated or just looking for a change normally, that, they're going to be the people or a halfway house or a recovery house is going to be the place where you can surround yourself with, hopefully, good people that are in recovery in some sort of program
that want change,
that are going to be trying to change and help you navigate that change of environments, like you said, going from living either on the streets or in jail or, with using to a more manageable
life. It's like step one, yeah, definitely. Step one for coming into one and just meeting friends. Like that's where I met most of my friends, in halfway houses or in the rooms. And I found family there, because of the way I used and the people I used with. I had to cut all those people off and find new friends and family. And because of the halfway houses and NA, I found that. And that's what keeps me clean.
Gotcha. Now, have you been in any more like really structured ones with a lot of rules? And because, of course, the 3/4 way or halfway houses usually have less rules, or the house sets up, the rules. Have you been in like an actual strict recovery house with blackouts and take your phone and all that fun shit?
I was in this one called the Will House in Bel Air, and it's a good program. It really is. It's good people in there. When I moved in, I wasn't allowed to have a phone for, I think, 2 weeks. Wasn't allowed to leave the property unless it was for work without another person. So I'd have like 2 people with me, or me and another person. Like, we weren't allowed to leave the property. Even to go to the store, you had to have someone with you. And we on Friday nights we had to eat dinner together. Like that was a new thing. Eat dinner together, and then we had to do an in-house meeting. It's good. It just wasn't. At that point, I was a veteran to these halfway houses, and I'm like, I don't need all this. You know what I mean? Like when I first came here, like I said, I was a monster. I didn't know anything, and I was just crazy. And then over time, I've gotten better. And then I went to that house. That was a great house, and I just felt like it was too much structure for me at that point. Even though I relapsed before, but
right.
It just, I was in a 1-year program once in Baltimore called the Helping Up Mission.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a halfway house. It's like a huge halfway house building. And it was very church-based, and you had classes during the day. It was a program. I guess it wasn't a halfway house, but that was the most structured place I've ever been. Even more structured than jail. I mean, honestly, in jail, they just put you in a cage. This place, they want to walk you around. You got to dress up to go to church and every day. It was just ridiculous. It's not my thing. I'm not that religious of a person to be going to church every day.
How long did you make it there?
2 weeks.
Oh,
only 2 weeks.
That's 1/26 of the program. I mean, that's it's not terrible.
None.
I'm really bothered, because I'm a guy who lives in this world of balance. I'm really bothered that there's halfway houses and 3/4 houses and not 1/4 houses. I don't know why. What would a 1/4 house be? Is that like the program you were in?
I'm guessing that's like Dexter.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one I didn't go to. But Dexter, they say that it has very good turnover. Like the best in the state, I think.
Well, from what I understand, I mean, just never been in a recovery house, but sponsoring people or being around people that have been in houses, it's like any of the programs can be successful. It's all up to the participant to give in and do it. It's like if you go there to any of them and decide you're going to do what the fuck you want to do and not follow rules and try to manipulate and con shit, you're going to get what you get, Yeah,
you get in what you put in is what you get out of this. But from what I understand, like Dexter gives you like a lot of the tools you need to succeed, like counseling and they make sure you go to meetings. They're around most of the time good people because they're handpicked. And from what I understand, that has a really good overturn of people staying clean after they get out of the program.
And I think one of the goals of any recovery housing should be, it's my fucking 2 cents, even though I don't manage any recovery houses, is to develop that like support group or support network for recovery. One of my criticisms is, and this is what I had experienced when I went through treatment, is a lot of times in treatment, they'll tell you not to go to a recovery house in the area where you're from, because of the risk of going back to your home environment. So they want to send you to a new environment. But for me, like my family and everybody that I, loved and cared about that wasn't in my addiction was all here in Cecil County. I didn't want to fucking leave. Like, this is where my family was.
Everyone's different. I had to leave Delaware to come here to try to get clean, and that didn't work out. So then I had to go to Bel Air and go to the halfway houses there.
Because Delaware was too close to Maryland, where we are.
Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll go with that. When I moved out to Bel Air, I didn't know anyone. I mean, just the people that I met going to the treatment center out there, and I just kept on doing what I was doing here when I was clean. Like, when I'm clean, I do the 100. I'm going to meetings, I'm talking to people, I'm, step work and everything. And when I moved out there, when I was here, I had distractions from past relationships that seemed that would take me out. So when I moved out to Bel Air, it was like I could reinvent myself again. Because when I first came here, everyone knew me as Johnny the Dumpster, and like this facade of myself, and I would walk in the rooms and they'd scream Mcgee, and I would be like, and get pulled back into that, even though I'm trying to change. But like my first year here, I was crazy. So when I moved out to Bel Air, I just kind of shut up a little bit and listened more and just reinvented myself out there with the halfway house communities and with NA. And because the way I was doing it before just wasn't working, I kind of just put my head down and shut up a little bit.
So how useful, I mean, we talk about this, and I don't want to single out any particular house, but a house that maybe is a little more selective about who they take in, and we talk about, oh, well, it seems like they have good outcomes. Well, one, does it seem like it, or do they, right?
Mm-hmm.
And two, how effective is that for the people who can't get in? Like, that's got to feel pretty shitty.
Well, it's not good for the people that can't get in because they're not getting in there.
Right. I mean, but so it's really like, well, how useful is this place? Are they just hand selecting people that have a good chance of making it? Is that what's increasing their chances? Like, could those people make it anywhere?
I don't know what the selective, how they select the people that they're letting in. Maybe it's something to do with how willingness they want to be when they do the interview. You know what I mean? Like, some of these places, they want to put you in therapy. They want to take your money. They want to, like the Man House in Bel Air. You're not allowed a cell phone for, I think, the whole time you live there.
Jeez.
You have to go to one meeting a day.
It's probably super healthy.
Yeah. You have chores you have to do, and I mean, it's a year program, and it's the Man House because you're not allowed to talk to any girls. You're not allowed to do any of that, and it's super strict.
Is that why they call it the Man House?
I think it's actually called the Man House. It's named after the woman that was in AA, and her last name was Mann. I don't know the history of AA that well, but
the Man House is named after a woman named Mann.
Her last name was Mann. I'm pretty sure it's something like that. And has a high success rate.
How does that work in the world of 2021, where we're much more understanding of the idea that not everybody's heterosexual?
I don't know. That's a good point there.
I feel like the Man House could turn into the new YMCA. Like, it's fun to stay at the MANN. It's fun to stay.
Well, so I heard this concept recently, and I wanted to run it by you, but it's coming up sort of in this conversation, so I'm going to bring it up now. It's called pro-social shaming. Have you heard that term before?
No.
Okay.
So we always have this idea that shaming of anyone seems pretty negative. Like, you shouldn't ever shame people. That's a derogatory term. Right. Well, there's this concept that's called pro-social shaming, which is in groups, and I imagine this, like a really structured halfway house like that is one of them, is that they come up with these cultures and these norms within that community, and if you don't adhere to them, they will, in essence, shame you to bring you back in fold with the groups. And what they found is that groups with this high, like a lot of rules and a lot of regulations and a lot of this pro-social shaming typically have more success than more open programs. If you look at like Christian churches, it's almost like the more structured and rigid they are in a lot of the beliefs, the bigger the church denominations are, because people like the camaraderie. Like, there's some benefits that come with being in that tight group. There's a lot of benefits that come from the group.
Yeah, none of the little boys telling the pastor.
Yeah, that's true. But if you allow other people to come in, what they use the term freeloaders, if you allow all these freeloaders to come in and get all the benefits of the group without the pro-social shaming, they will actually break down and destroy the group. So it's an interesting concept. I hadn't heard it before, and I was like, huh. Is that why, like, a program that is really structured with all these rules, like we're going to take your phone and we're going to, some of them have like blackouts, like you're not allowed to talk to any people outside of that house for
30 days, 90 days,
2 weeks or 4 weeks,
Cold.
You only can communicate or get rides from people within the house, things like that. If all that pro-social shaming leads to higher levels of success too.
So genetically, it makes sense, right? We're kind of wired to be in these groups of, like, you're either in the in crowd or you die. Like, that's sort of our genetic history 14,000 years ago. But I mean, I think that concept's interesting. I could see why it leads to success, but I don't know necessarily that we need to do that to equal success, right? I think the successful part of that might come from this idea of inclusivity. Right, reading a parent book a long time ago, parenting book, it was talking about this idea of, like, when you want to give your kids a guideline that you guys do, you use your last name and you say, we don't do this, right? You're part of this group. We're Crystals, we're Mcgees, we're Turks, and we don't do that, right? Because it makes people feel a part of, very especially. And so, yeah, if you're in a house and they've got these rules and you're on the inside of that probably does feel really inclusive and connecting. And we talk about, the opposite of, addiction is connection sometimes. So I could imagine that would work. I don't know that we need to necessarily do it that way.
Well, and my concern was, well, that's great for the success of the group, but is that good for the success of the whole of our community?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's great that house can save 20 people, but what about the other 150 people that need help?
They turn down in the interview.
Right.
They feel even
suffer.
worse.
There's only so many rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing.
Did you ever interview and get turned down somewhere?
Many times. Many times.
And how does it feel to think, oh, that program's successful, but I'm just too bad for them too?
I mean, I understand why it was done with me. You
Do
know?
you?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. Andrew, he would not let me go to his halfway house because he knew if I moved back to Elkton that I would be high again in 6 months because of my
Track record.
Track record, yeah.
So,
I've
so
just
where'd
come.
you go?
I ended up staying in Bel Air, and then became successful. I mean, thus far,
How do we know that wouldn't have happened if you came here, though?
Just from the past. I mean, I would move. I honestly, I can't. I don't know how many halfway houses I lived in because some of them I lived in the same one 4 times.
Right.
I lived in every one in Elkton. Every halfway house in Elkton, and I think 2 of them I lived 1 4 times, and I lived in the other one 6 times. So over
I would say
5
everyone.
years.
There's been 6, I think, that I know of. There was a couple in
Limitless, Oxford, Principles, Bagua. I didn't live in Bagua.
Solutions.
That's the only one I didn't live in. Solutions. Then one of them moved to a different house. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. But I lived in all of them multiple times. Solutions, I lived there 3 times. Like, it wasn't just a one stay thing. It was there multiple times. And then I even tried Delaware with the Oxford houses. And that was good. It was just that I wasn't ready. I would get an uppercut with some feelings and some emotions, and I knew exactly where to go. In Delaware, because that's where I was raised. So I went straight to the city. I was 10 minutes away.
And I only had one experience with a recovery house, and it set me off. Like, I never went out of treatment. I always just went home because I had good family supports. My parents didn't use, and I didn't have to go home to a using environment, and they were a positive support. So I didn't go into recovery housing then. But when I did get in recovery this time, it was more just a personal choice. Like, I just woke up one day, it's like, I'm fucking done. I'm going to get clean. I started going to meetings. Like, about 30 days in, I went to this recovery house and interviewed, and it was, I want to say it was an Oxford house. I'm pretty sure it was. And I interviewed with all the people at the house, and then they voted and said no.
Sounds like an
there.
Oxford house.
And so that left a bad taste in my mouth with recovery housing. I was always like, fuck that shit. That's, it's bullshit. And that was it. I never went.
It's definitely, it all depends on the people in the house. I mean, for real, especially in the Oxford house. If you, in an Oxford house, if someone gets high, they can hide it, but just because of the people, there's no manager, and it's the people managing it. But I've always said, if someone gets high in a halfway house, it's like strawberries in the refrigerator. One gets moldy, and like you leave it in the fridge, that mold's going to jump to the next berry, and then you have a sick house, and then they have outreach that are like the Oxford police that come over and they drug test the whole house and clean up shop, kick everyone out or whatever they got to do, move a couple people to different houses, so.
And we've seen that here, or at least I've experienced that here in this recovery community. Like, there's been times I've known people that've been in different houses, for long periods of time, and they seem to be really good, and they have a really successful program. You see a lot of their people at meetings or engaged in recovery supports, and it seems really good, and then a couple of months go by, and then you hear like, oh shit, everybody in that house is getting high now, and
Yep, the whole house.
It can change on a dime. Are there any things are there any indicators that you've ever noticed that would be like, oh, this maybe isn't a good place, or do you not really know going in until you get in there?
You really don't know going in because we're all addicts and we're good at hiding things and putting on a good face.
Yeah.
Living with somebody, you learn a lot about them, and you see that their habits of coming home, watching TV, taking a shower, just whatever, because there's only so many bathrooms in a house. If someone starts coming home and going straight to their room for 3 hours and then coming out in their work clothes still, and you're like, what? What's going on with you? You just went upstairs and shot dope and fell asleep in your bed.
Right.
Usually you come home, take a shower, put on your nice clothes, cook dinner, and then go to a meeting. If you're just coming home and going straight to bed, either you had a really hard day, but if you've been doing it for 2 weeks now, like, you're up to something. You just pay attention to what people do, and especially if you live with them for a while. I've been that guy that came home from work and went upstairs and fucking smoked crack in the halfway house. I've done it. I'm not proud of it, but I did it. And let me tell you, don't do it. It is fucking paranoid. You're in a room in a house with 8 other guys and you're smoking crack. Now, when I smoke crack, I'm paranoid already, but now I'm in a recovery house with 8 other people, and the only thing someone has to do is walk in my room and I'm kicked out. It's way worse than the cops, thinking that the cops are coming.
When you said you smoke crack in a recovery house, all I could think was you can't peek out the blinds. They're going to come in the fucking door, right? I'm like, do you cut like a mail slot in your fucking bedroom
Barricade
door?
the door.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I always thought of that with people that go to meetings high. I'm like, that is the last fucking place I would ever want to be high, is at a meeting.
And I've been there too. It sucks.
Yeah. This episode has been brought to you in part by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit recovery organization made up of people in recovery, family members, and allies. Together, members strive to protect the dignity of those that use drugs and those in recovery by advocating for treatment, harm reduction and support resources, and mentoring. Please visit us at www.voicesofhopemaryland.org and consider donating to our cause.
So what makes a good recovery house? Like, are there certain practices besides the people, right? I get that, like, the environment is definitely going to make it, but like, is there certain qualifications? Have you seen certain things over time that you're like, oh, these practices kind of work, these were somewhat useless?
It's honestly like, I feel like there's levels. Like, you start here and then you can work your way up to the 3/4 house. Like, you know what I mean? You come out at your first time in treatment, and your first time or out of treatment, your first time out of jail, first time trying to get clean. Like, go to a structured house for a little while, get a job, get on your own feet, get some stuff, and then like start to go up in the levels of stuff. That's what I see that works a lot for people, and end up in a 3/4 house so that you're basically living on your own, but you're still being held accountable, and then find some guys and get like rent a room together so you still have some accountability before you go out into the world and with no accountability at all. My first year held me accountable was honestly probation, because that was over my head. Like, I don't want to go back to jail. I have 5 years over my head, and I went to these recovery houses, and they were holding me accountable too. But rules that don't make sense, honestly, they all make sense because it's things that you should live by. Like cleaning up. You got to chore every day. You got to take the trash out. The phone thing for a whole year, that's a little ridiculous, honestly, because like the kind of work I do, I can get a phone call right now and saying like I got to go to a job and make some money. Like, if I don't have a phone, what, are they going to write me a letter?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
So that doesn't make sense to me, not having a phone for a year. But I understand why they take the phone away, because that's your connection to like your old life. If you don't get a new number and you don't get and you keep your same Facebook, like, you can still have connections to your old life that you're, you know what I mean? Like all
So
your
weird.
dealers and all your friends that you got high with. Like every time I got clean, I had to get a new Facebook, and people that actually know me know that I have like 12, you know, because I had to start over, reset my life, you know? So I understand it, but I disagree with it. It doesn't fit me, you know?
Yeah, and I've heard some other rules. One of them that always struck me a little weird, and again, I kind of get it, but it doesn't seem overly helpful, is that you have to leave the house by a certain time in the day, and then you can't come back till a certain time at night. And that's regardless of if you have a job or anything else. Like, you have to leave by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and then you can't come back until 5 o'clock.
I forgot about that rule, honestly, because I went through that my first couple months in recovery in the Solution House, and I didn't have a job. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a social security card. Didn't have anything. I came to that house with like a trash bag of clothes, if I had that. And I had to hang out at the health department until like 1 o'clock until I could go back to the house. And like, I see how it pushes you out of the house. It tries to get rid of like freeloaders, basically. People that are just going to sit there until your funding, you know, is up, and then you're back getting high again. Because that's what a lot of people do in these recovery houses. They get funding for 2 months. They go to these halfway houses, and they do nothing. They don't work on themselves. They don't try to get a job. They don't try anything, and they just freeload for 2 months, and then boom, they're back on the streets, living the way they have for many, many years, and they're comfortable like that. This is like a break for them to get some weight up, you know, maybe get some money in their pocket, maybe if they decide to get a job, you know. And then I hear a lot of people say, I'm in a recovery house, I'm not paying $150 a week. That's way too much money. But it isn't really, because it's the accountability that you're paying for. You know, the accountability, the networking, and all of that keeps you clean. Because if you weren't paying that and you were just getting your own place, no one's holding you accountable anymore. And a lot of people stay for 3 months, get their own place, and then they're fucking high their first week because they have no network and no, you know, none of that. And
they haven't figured out.
They haven't figured out their emotions and feelings and all that, and you know, and they get high.
So I'll say, and I don't know that any one of these recovery house programs works better than another or doesn't or any of that, but my experience is being around meetings, people who are in recovery houses, I can't say that like it stood out that any of these people necessarily did better because they were in a recovery house or not. Like I feel like, yeah, some people stay and some people don't. And
same thing with the program, you know?
Right.
It's all up to the person.
I guess for me, that raises the question, like, is this really, because there's a lot of money on the back end of this, right?
Yes.
That like people in recovery aren't necessarily aware of. Like there's tax breaks, there's all these different things that go into it, right? Mm-hmm. There's state funding, federal funding. I can't swear that actually this recovery house is doing anything because, like you said, it's probably the same percentages of just everybody else that comes in. And I don't know that justifies having them.
If it wasn't for the halfway houses, I don't know if I would know about recovery, and I sure the hell wouldn't have had a place to go to grow, to continue my journey in recovery. Where I'll tell you what, if I got out of jail and I had to live in Elkton because of my probation and I had nowhere to go, if I lived underneath a bridge, I know I wouldn't be going to meetings. I would have been getting high and I would have went back to jail for 5 years. So having the halfway house gave me an opportunity to grow into a better person because I had a place to go that was safe. Because of the way I lived prior, I wouldn't have took that opportunity to grow.
Yeah, and I imagine, and you mentioned it earlier, and this is what I think, is that modeling of people that are trying to live clean and successful helps. Like, so for myself, I lived in a healthy family. My parents paid bills. We never went without food. Like, we had stuff. So I knew what normal life looked like. I mean, I couldn't do it very well. I would get my own place and not pay the bills and end up, kicked out because I was using all my money on drugs.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to do it. I just chose not to do it. Whereas it sounds like your situation might have been a little different. It doesn't sound like you
my
ever
role
had
models
a lot of
didn't pay rent.
modeling. Right.
We just bounced around. my whole life. So
Right.
I went to like 11 schools in 9 years. So like we didn't stay too long anywhere.
Is there something we could do better though? Like instead of the recovery house system, which each one seems different in its own ways and has its own rules and guidelines, and none of them seem to necessarily work better than any others. I get that you're saying it's a good environment and something to introduce you to meetings and to network possibly. Is there some way, because there's complaints that like the medicalization of treatment for addiction is very much like, hey, you do this 28-day program or we detox you basically and then send you out in the world. Do we need to medicalize further treatment, whereas it's not like maybe it's more standardized, maybe there's more medical, treatment type facilities that last longer that you live in, that reorient you to the world? Are we doing it well, having it just, Joe Schmo can go fucking buy a house and turn it into a recovery house and make his own rules and do whatever?
Well, if there was like a perfect way to recover for the average person, I would say that they would go to a detox. They would go to like a 3-month program of treatment so that their mind gets further away from the drug, and then they start to miss reality of being in the real world, and then go to a halfway house so that they get that taste of freedom from the treatment that they'll get with the halfway house, but it isn't like too much, you know what I mean?
Right.
So there's still control, and you're getting like a little bit better, a little bit more freedom, and you appreciate that freedom more. And then, you move your way up the halfway house to a 3/4 house, and you're like, 8 months ago I was in a detox where I wasn't allowed to leave the grounds, and then I was sick, and then I went to a treatment where I wasn't allowed to leave. Then I went to this house where I was allowed out till 10 o'clock, and you just slowly progress being reintroduced into society. You know what I mean? That would be the perfect way for someone that's, I guess, I plan on opening my own recovery house in like a year, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if everything in my life keeps on going the way it does, it's a good, like you said, there's money in it. And I like money, and I make money, and then I don't know what to invest in. But I've been to so many of these houses that I know how they work, and I owe a lot to these halfway houses, even though they kicked me out. Even though, like, I learned shit from getting kicked out of them, honestly. I learned a lot about myself. And
It's called pro-social shaming.
Pro-socially shame you till you're better.
I mean, this wasn't a good thing to be asked to come and speak about the recovery houses. It wasn't like, it's not a good thing to have been to every recovery house in the state of Delaware and Maryland, but
Well, it's good that you're not dead. See,
I'm very lucky to be alive many times over.
I mean, when we think about standardization and like, do they need? I feel like right now people can just kind of do whatever the fuck they want and call it a recovery house, right? And it creates tough situations and no-win situations, right? This person used. Do we put them out in the cold street tonight? Do we, it's 10:30 at night. Do we let them stay till the morning? Do we try to get them back into detox instead of kicking them out? Like it's complicated. I'm not saying there's a good set of standards, but I just feel like it's way too wide open where you have houses, like you said, where everybody's using, or houses where everybody's on point. Like,
well, and then on top of that, they are trying. So there's work being done towards that.
Getting kicked out in the middle of the night.
Well, just getting more of a oversight or structure. Carlos that we had on the one episode, he does a lot of work in that area. But they're working towards that, some sort of standardization of recovery housing. The other sort of back issue is that the state has a lot of its whatever you want to call it, rules and regulations that it does put on houses that take state funding. So if you're going to take any sort of state funding, there are certain rules that get pushed onto the houses that can cause some friction. One of them being that if you take state funding, you're not supposed to be able to turn down people that are on medicated assisted treatment. So what do you do with someone who's on, I'll just say a heavy dose of, some sort of maintenance that's in another house with a bunch of people of abstinence. You can't necessarily
Mix
tell
them,
that guy
yeah.
he needs to go to 12-step meetings because that's not in alignment with that treatment model. And so that creates a whole nother, like, how do you regulate that? Like, they've created a problem with that rule. And the idea is great. The idea is that anyone that's on a maintenance program should have equal access to housing as anyone else. We can't just have every recovery house can't just be abstinence based. Then you have nothing to support people that choose a different pathway. But the application of that hasn't been so easy to manage.
In my experience with the maintenance, regular halfway houses, they either have like a maintenance house where everyone's on maintenance and maybe the manager isn't, so he can watch them, but he's fucking stressed the hell out all the time, honestly, and pulling his own hair out. And then they have, total absence houses where no one's getting high, no one's doing not getting high, but no one's on maintenance. And then there's Oxford houses where you have a mixture. And the people that are usually in maintenance in these houses usually don't last too long because, it's ran by the inmates, and the inmates get jealous of seeing someone not out at the couch because they're methadones.
Take homes.
Yeah, because they're,
There's fucking take homes in my fridge. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, and you can't, if you're trying to stay clean, get clean or whatever, and there's someone in your house nodding out at the stove, like, you get jealous. You miss that feeling, so that's hard right
tough.
there. It's tough.
Right.
I mean, I've been there, and it doesn't work out too well usually. So that's one of the things they're working on, I think. That's why this one guy that I'm real good friends with, he owns like 4 houses out in Bel Air, and I went through one of them. He separates them. He has clean houses and maintenance houses, and it's just, they work, but the state funding, you're right, the state funding will only fund you if you take you got to take everybody. You can't pick and choose
selectively. Yeah.
Now with people getting kicked out at night, like, because that's a thing that's
a
going
issue
on right now, and that's really kicking halfway houses' asses right now. Is like, most of the time your house meeting's at 9:00 at night. Sometimes even 10:00 at night. It depends on how many the owner owns and the way he gets around or whatever. And you go and you have this house meeting, and at the end of the house meeting, you take a drug test. Now it's like 9:30, 10:00 at night, and you're taking a drug test and you fail. Now you're getting kicked out. So now you got to get kicked out 10:00 at night, and you have a car. And you go get in your car and you get high, and then you crash and kill somebody or kill yourself. But you can't stay at the house because you're high, and you got 6 other guys in the house that are looking at you high, and they're getting jealous or it's triggering them. And so they're like, they don't know what to do with these people because they don't want to kick them out and they don't want to keep them in the house, because you keep someone in the house that's high, other people will get high eventually, So they're trying to figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, the other problem with that, sorry not to cut you off, is that you've also, like in your case where you relocated, you're taking people that aren't from an area, bringing them to an area. So someone who might be from the Eastern Shore or somewhere up in Delaware ends up here in Elkton. Then you kick them out of the recovery house, and if they don't have a car or maybe don't have money,
that too,
then they're just fucking homeless in a new place. Like, and now you've created an environment where you're transplanting,
problems,
people that are going to need resources, or addicts that are going to need resources, because you encourage them to come here. That's the flip side of that, is that house encourage those people to come there. There's I don't want to say a sales pitch, but when you go to any rehab, the houses are in communication with the rehab because they want the referrals. And as you mentioned, there's like a back end to all this for money, and the houses need those referrals so that they can stay full. They don't make any money when they're not full. So they're in connection with the treatment providers so that they're a good referral for people. So they're selling people, hey, come to my house, up here in Elkton. But then you use, and I kick you out, and now you're
homeless in
you've
Baltimore.
affected our community, right? And you're homeless somewhere else.
Yeah. Yep.
Carlos also presented the idea to us when he was on that episode about the idea that, like, we have these house managers, but they're basically getting free rent usually, or reduced rent, and that's not their full-time job. So, like, it's really, they're working 40 hours a week or more already at their job, and then they're supposed to be this house manager, but don't have the energy or resources really to have the time to manage the house like they would need to, and that there should be a standardized, house manager role that gets paid, that's what the person does, somewhat in a professional capacity. Do you think that would be useful?
Yeah, maybe some kind of training or some sort of...
There's different levels to the house manager thing. You know what I mean? Some people are... To be a house manager, I think you should have at least a year clean, first off, and work a program and are trying to better yourself. Now, making that a full-time position is I don't think is worth it. Unless you have 20 guys in the house or something. Most houses only have 6 to 9 guys. 6 to 8 guys. Most halfway houses do. And they go out to work, they do their thing, they sleep. So they're only really up in the house for 5 hours a day. Honestly, so you just talk to them a little bit and watch them and make sure that their habits are the same. And, and you have other people in the house watching out too. That's a good thing. You got to have communication with the people in the house. You become friends, you become a unit, become a family, and you just watch each other. And the house manager is the one that is supposed to have the full communication with the owner of the house in case something does happen, and I don't know about getting a full salary for that, because then it wouldn't make any money. A house I could see having free rent.
Yeah, I was going to say having some of them
free
do
rent.
free rent.
That's most of what happens. You get free rent or you get reduced rent. But getting an actual paycheck from a house that only has 8 guys, it wouldn't be profitable for the owner of the house.
Hard role too. I've known people.
It's hard to kick someone out in the middle of the night.
Well, that, or if you want to be the militant guy that upholds the rules, obviously people aren't going to like you very much, because even the people that are there that are serious about recovery, you always want to break some rule. You know what I mean? Even if it's a minor rule here or there, you're kind of like, this one doesn't matter. Aren't you going to look the other way for me? Because we're buddies,
Definitely happens.
You got to get that guy. Fuck that guy. But me, I get a slide,
Definitely happens.
And if you get a bunch of people that are going to meetings, say all of them are in the same fellowship, whether it's AA or NA, then you got that whole social clique. You know what I mean? You want to fit in with your social clique, so you can't be throwing your buddies out in the middle of the night or, on a guy's ass because he hasn't been to meetings in a month or two. It's so hard.
I lived in a house that was half AA, half NA, and the NA guys definitely kind of stuck together, and we would argue with the AA guys, because this the way the steps work and shit. And they were like, "Yeah, I'm on step 6. I'm already sponsoring 2 people," and we're like, "Yeah, I'm on step 1 on question 50," and I'm like, "I didn't have a conversation today to get on step 3," and you have 3 months clean and you have 2 sponsees and you're on step 5. Whoa, okay, you know what I mean? Hope they stay alive. We would fucking go in and out with these guys about it all the time.
It amazed me. I posted a meme about AA steps versus NA steps the other day, and so many people in the comments were like, "I don't get it," and I'm like, "Have you never? Where the fuck do you live? This is everybody knows this shit. What do you mean you don't understand? They're the same steps." I'm like, "Oh my god." Okay.
They're a conversation.
Right. So, one thing I have found interesting about this discussion so far is that before I had all this online interaction with recovery communities, my take would probably be the same as what I've heard today. But I feel like all these recovery house programs are really, really based around this idea of going to a 12-step complete abstinence-based program of recovery. And seeing what I see online in the recovery communities, that is not what everybody's doing, right? There are so many different paths to recovery and so many different ways people do it. And so I'm just curious, how set up are these recovery houses to handle people who are recovering in some completely different way, right? Whether that's what I do is therapy every week, or what I do is, a strict meditation and yoga program. I feel like a lot of recovery houses are forcing you to 12-step meetings, which is...
The stricter houses are.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem very inclusive to me for what I know recovery to be nowadays.
Yeah, more of the stricter houses, they want you to go to a 12-step meeting. Now, other ones, they'll accept therapy. I've been in houses that accept therapy. That what's the other one? Smart recovery, things like that. It's just harder to get like a slip signed. Because some recovery houses, they want you to take a paper in, get it signed to prove that you've been going to this many meetings, especially the recovery houses that want you to go to one every day or 5 a week or something like that. So I've never been, even when I was in houses that I had to sign slips, I was never big on bringing my slip. Like, I'm not. You're going to take my word that I went to these meetings. And more than likely, you're going to see me there and you're going to know that I was in a meeting because I'm a fucking loudmouth guy. So Right.
And then in the Oxford houses, I think, or that model, I shouldn't just use them, but there isn't even like a manager, right?
No manager.
Equal,
so everyone has to watch each other.
Yeah, so you could do, I mean, I don't say you could do whatever you want, but the idea is if you go into that house and if they accept you in and you tell them what your path of recovery is, you would think that they would be okay with that. They don't require you to go to meetings, but they might be hard to get in.
They want you to. They want you to, but once you get into the Oxford house and you're there for a little bit, a lot of people fall back on meetings and then they end up getting high. I mean, I've done it. You know, I started going to meetings. I mean, I moved into an Oxford house. I stopped going to meetings so much. I started hanging out with my girlfriend more, and then she got high and I was high. You know, so it's just a lot of them. And with the Oxford house, you can do therapy and count. You can do smart recovery. You can do NA. You can do anything you want. Whatever you want that helps, that you say helps you recover, change, and become a better person. You can use that as doing something to grow. You know.
Well, like in this ever ongoing conversation between me and you about like what keeps the shame of pushing people into a place that maybe isn't the right recovery model for them. And like, if you're going to detoxes or treatment and they're pushing you to recovery houses out of your area, in your area, or if that's the only place you have to go, you know, somebody like John who didn't have anywhere else to go really. And that's where they're telling you in the recovery house that needs to be, you know, you have to go to these 12-step programs. Like that's somewhere along the way, people are being funneled into these places when I just don't feel like that's the only or best sometimes way of recovery anymore. And so we just keep talking about how does this keep happening? Well, this is one of the ways recovery houses are pushing people there.
I don't know any other options.
Yeah, the hope is that if you're in a decent treatment facility with a good counselor or case manager who's making these referrals, that they're going to refer you to a program that's in alignment with what you want to do. Like, not every house requires abstinence and 12 steps. Some do. And you would hope that the counselor who is on your case is going to refer you to the path that you choose. The problem, I think, is, and we touched on it on some of the other episodes, is client brokering and kickbacks for referrals and things like that. That's where it can get a little sketchy.
Well, but how many people too in treatment with 26 days or 20 days when they're planning out where you're going to go, how many have been exposed to this idea that there's other recovery models, right? And I'm not just talking about some kind of maintenance, anything that's outside of the scope of 12-step, right? There's people who fucking go to art therapy or something. I don't know. Like, there's a billion different ways that I'm seeing people online are finding recovery and staying here and finding happiness. How do you know what 20 days clean if you've never been exposed to them? Like, I don't feel like they're talked about. And I feel like you go to treatment and they're like, well, these are your options. There's Suboxone or there's 12-step. Right? Like, are they really in there talking about, man, there's...
I think Smart's getting a lot of push these days.
Okay, yeah.
And you can Google... I mean, anymore, Google's the fucking way you find most things. If you just start Googling non-12-step recovery, you can come up with stuff. Because I've done research looking at... We've wanted to have other people on about other recovery programs. So I've Googled it, and you can find... There's a bunch. There's programs out there for, like, how to... whatever you call it, like maintenance, not maintenance, but how to manage, moderation management and things like that. And they're not hard to find those programs. I don't know about, like, say, housing would depend on your interview process and what the house was willing to accept.
I guess just like without, and here I am, a guy in recovery for an amount of time, like without this interaction we've gotten from doing this podcast of me just chatting with people online about their recoveries, I had no fucking clue that abstinence wasn't the only way.
Right.
So here I am, a guy who considers himself worldly and spent 15 years of my life in recovery thinking abstinence was the only way or the gold standard. And so now I'm like, how does somebody who's been living under a bridge for the last 20 years have any idea that there's other things other than abstinence to choose? And when they go to treatment and they say, hey, what kind of path to recovery do you want? Well, abstinence. That's all the fuck I've ever heard of.
Well, and that was part of the thing I think was hoping with Ray was that I think through a lot of these programs now, they aren't just, I don't know about rehabs. It would be interesting to talk to someone who's just now getting out of a rehab to see. We got a couple rehabs in this area. I don't know what rehabs are saying, but if you go to the health department, they will give you all your options. They will not just tell you 12 steps or maintenance. Like, they are very educated in what you're supposed to be doing now. If you come to a place like Voices, they're going to give you some other options. They encourage SMART or whatever. So it is starting to pick up, but yeah, 15, 20 years ago, if you went to treatment, it was abstinence, and that was that. That was the only thing.
If you talk to people walking in the door of Voices 6 months ago, whenever the hell it was that I was here, people don't know. Like, you can present these other options. Hey, there's all these, and they're like, no, abstinence is recovery. That's what it looks like. Like, they only know 12. Like, that's all people have ever heard of.
That's the generic one. The most common one is just stop doing drugs and your life gets better.
Go to 12 steps.
You know what I mean? That's
so it's just.
But you look at that as a problem. See, he looks at that as a problem.
I do when everybody's dying. Like, it's obviously not the answer.
Well, they're doing the drugs that they're not supposed to be doing.
So if the scientific study shows that 12-step only works for 10% of people,
which it doesn't, by the way.
Maybe.
That isn't a scientific study, so you can't say that.
You making shit up?
No, it's a scientific study, but that's all right. We'll talk about that after this. If that's what happens, 10% of people get actually helped by that or whatever, right? And we watch people die all the time. I mean, it was just another person in our area or from our area that's gone over the last couple days. Like,
yeah, I was friends with him.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't tell you how many people it's been since I got here. At what point do we say, well, maybe something's a little off here?
But how many of those people have also tried or been on a maintenance program? Or tried or been on other recovery programs?
I don't know.
You can't just say because they had one interaction with a 12-step fellowship and they overdose that it's the 12-step fellowship is the cause. They could have had interactions with maintenance programs. They could have had interactions with counseling and therapy. You know what I mean?
Okay,
it's not necessarily fair to say because you had an interaction with a 12-step fellowship and then you died, the fellowship doesn't work.
I'm not saying the fellowship doesn't work. I'm saying this. If we had a thing that helped cancer and it worked for 10% of the cancer people that we sent to it, we would still be fucking looking for a better answer. We would say, oh, yeah, hey, at least 1 in 10 are getting saved, but there's got to be something that works more effectively than this. And it's just interesting to me that when I bring this up to people, it's never like that same sentiment in them. It's like, oh, no, the people fucking failed. That's their fucking problem. And I'm like, if we know this is only doing it for a certain percentage of people, why aren't we still looking for a better answer? Why are we just so content to say this is fine?
I think there's a big movement of people that are. I mean, so, yeah, I think within the 12-step community, you might not hear that as much. But if you reach out beyond, like now with all the harm reduction methods that are going on and I don't want to say advent of SMART, it's been around, but you're starting to see more SMART, more recovery dharma, like these different options are becoming available. I mean, I don't know that anybody that's trying to squash them or put them down and say that you shouldn't do them.
The 12-step programs are programs that you get what you put into it. All right? If you do. If the more you put yourself into the steps, networking, the program, meetings, and stuff like that, you start to become better. Now, the cancer thing, it's just you take a shot and you know it works or it doesn't. With this, you have to put work in on yourself to become better.
That's a good story, but 20 years ago there was a guy who was going to 6 meetings a week and working steps and had a network and called a sponsor every day and used anyway. So what's that?
That is That's choice. It's not. That's when it becomes choice. You chose to get high.
Did you choose to get high the first time you got high?
The first, no.
Okay.
I know it was presented to me by my family, people that I trust, and it was there, and I tried it. First time.
What do you use to cope today? What do you use when you say, this probably isn't a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway?
I'm a workaholic.
Okay.
So I'm addicted to money, and I like food, and I like sex. I have a girlfriend for that today. That's different. So usually I lived life different, but I have a girlfriend, so yeah.
I guess from a therapy standpoint, like, people use coping measures because life is intolerable, right? It's a survival skill. It's a survival mechanism. And so it's very much less this higher level thinking choice that we seem to want to make it out to be. That's my take on it. When we're in survival mode, when our nervous system is like fight, flight, or freeze, there's all that frontal lobe brain stuff. That's all shut the fuck off. Like, I don't have choice anymore. I got to get by somehow.
But I guess when I look at this story you said about the guy with 20 years,
he didn't have 20 years. That was just 20 years ago that happened.
Oh, well, even if a guy got 20 years and then used, like, I don't know that that's necessarily a success or a failure. Like, that level of abstinence or period of life that he had doing something different, he's not dead. He's not overdosed. His life hopefully got better during that thing. So I wouldn't necessarily call anyone that comes into 12-step and then decides to use again, like, that doesn't make that a failure.
No, I don't think it's a failure.
Program hasn't helped them or worked in some way.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have this. I just feel like we blame the people who don't get it for not doing it. And I don't know that that's exactly true. Like, that story says that person did it and it didn't work.
I've been trying to stay clean for 5 years, and I'm a chronic relapser. And me taking a break from doing drugs, getting my life together somewhat, and then losing it all again because I got high, and then getting it all back and losing it, getting it all back and losing it over and over for many years, many times. Like, I learned something about myself each relapse, going out and coming back. Going out, I gotten better, I feel, with every time I relapsed. You know, this is not a perfect program. I mean, they say the program's perfect, but people aren't. And I definitely am not perfect, but I definitely have learned more about myself and how I react to situations, emotions, and feelings through relapse and trying again and trying again and trying again.
Yeah, I don't, there's no shame in relapse, and I'm not saying that. I just, if we were less content with settling for this is the answer, and we went back retroactively, and there was some other thing we could have introduced to your life, right? Maybe it didn't keep you clean this whole time, but maybe it made your life better, and you got this sooner because of this other thing, whatever that may be, right? Wouldn't you retrospectively say, man, I wish that would have been what I was introduced to instead of, like, wouldn't you have wanted your life to have been better?
It depends on what it is, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's what's happening, though, to me.
It might be. I don't feel like the word is spread enough if it is happening.
I was on methadone for 3 years, and it was the worst withdrawal, the worst experience I ever had, having to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day to go to the clinic to take a shot every day. And then I still got high off of crack, so I was smoking crack. I mean, I didn't do the methadone program in any way the way it was supposed to be done, you know, but I had the worst withdrawals in my life in jail, you know, in prison, and it just sucked. And I would never go back on a maintenance program because of the experience I had on the methadone, my own personal experience, you know? And so I tried that way. That didn't work for me. And I did not like the outcome of trying to get off of it. You know, I did not like the way I felt in any way because I was like sick for like 2 months, it felt like. And so then what else was there? You know?
I think that's his point. Is
Yeah,
that's,
yeah. I mean,
that's
I'll say
it
this.
was the 12
options.
Yeah.
It would not shock me if in 20 years we have evidence and we found that something about the 12-step program, I don't know what, maybe it's just the way the fellowship acts, maybe it's just humanity, the way we treat each other, I don't know what it is, but it wouldn't shock me if we found that something about the program probably contributed to these people that don't last here, right? Like if there's some other way we could be,
I feel
or
like it's more
act.
with themselves. You know what I mean? Because okay, so if you're getting high for 15 years and you stop getting high, and then something happens in your life, like an emotion, a feeling, and you hit that feeling, and in your mind you have these deer paths from getting high for so long, you go right back to automatically getting rid of those feelings. And what are you so used to doing for so many years? Getting high, and you just follow those deer paths to get high again, until you can change your brain and the way you think. That's what you will continue to do.
And maybe one day we find complete evidence that that's the fact, but until then, I will not be stuck on the idea that all these people that die, it's just they're lacking. I can't believe that. It doesn't make sense to me.
People's choice.
Well, and it's just sad to say, and I'm going to circle this back
Gotcha.
to recovery housing
All
in a
right.
minute, but it's sad to say, and I don't know this, and I hope I'm being awful bleak, but it might not be a problem that we can fix. You know what I mean? It might just be
It's
the
hard to
state
believe.
of our society is, well, I mean, it falls in line with a lot of other, if you look at addiction in general, to porn, phones, food, sex, drugs, it's at astronomical levels across the board for every substance, leads me to believe that it's more than just a drug problem, that we have a social ill. We have a very much something wrong in our society that
I agree.
is more than just any sort of 12-step program is going to fix. It's a culture or a way of life that needs fixing.
And I agree, and that's where I'm like, well, what are we missing that we can't transform these micro communities into these recovery communities? What are we missing that we can't transform them in ways that we need in all society, but at least we could transform them in ways where we'd stop having people die.
So I'll tell you about something when we're done. But
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
come back because I got to wrap up. I'm sorry. Do you want to?
No. Do you have any? What's the craziest, worst, dumbest things you've seen people get kicked out for, or you've been kicked out for, or you've seen happen?
I got kicked out of a house once for dumping a girl that got high, and they didn't like the way that I handled it, and a dog shit on my bed. A dog shit on my bed, and it was in the same week. Like I broke up with this girl.
That wasn't a dog.
And your friend might not have been. And
It was not a dog.
I got kicked out of
Not an animal, dog.
I got kicked out of a house because a dog shit on my bed, and I broke up with this girl, and because she was getting high, and one of the guys in the house brought her over and I guess was fucking her, and so I was mad at him. So the dog shit on my bed. So Outreach found out that there was a dog in the house. Wasn't supposed to have a dog. There was a dog. Oxford House found out, and they said that, and the guy that was sleeping with my girl said that he must have told because that dog shit on his bed. So I came home, and now there's two guys. One guy's I'm mad at, and the other guy's mad at me because he thinks that I told on him, and I didn't do that. So two of them teamed up on me. And I already had problems because just the way I acted, but I was the only one in the house going to meetings and working a program. So that's another thing. There's a whole house, none of them are doing the program, none of them are working on themselves. I was the only one, so they called me Captain Recovery in the house. So that already they're do we really want this guy here and all that? So I came home and They picked a fight with me, and the one guy was 7 foot tall. No joke, 7'1", big tall guy. And I told him that I would climb him like a tree and beat his ass. And we almost fought because I just got out of jail. I had a whole different attitude and about myself, and I ended up getting voted out and kicked out because a dog shit on my bed and someone slept with my girlfriend who got high. That was the craziest thing. Yeah.
I slept with a coworker's wife one time, and he's shitting my Tupperware My lunch Tupperware, so I don't think that was a dog.
That's a real thing.
Apparently, shitting on people's stuff is a get back, I guess, a revenge. Yeah, it was new to me. I'd never had my stuff shit in before.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible.
Did you keep the Tupperware?
No.
That would immediately.
Yeah, chalked that one up as a loss. It was a fair trade. His wife was hot. It was a fair trade.
Fair trade.
So, I mean, it sounds like at least this time you're successful. Things are going well.
I'm finally
Is there
out
anything
of
specific you attribute to that or the recovery house? How has that helped in this case?
I did what I was told. I did what it was suggested of me, and I just put myself around people that wanted better for themselves and better for me, and I just kept on doing that, and I finally got tired of starting over. You know what I mean? Because I never really had anything, so I would get to a point in my recovery where I would start to get everything back, and I didn't have anything to get. I would get the car back, get everything, and I would get to a point where I was like, okay, well, I got everything back. Like, what is the next step? And I had no idea, and I would end up getting high. And now I'm like past that, and I'm out of the recovery house finally. I've been out of recovery house for 3 months now, and life's good. Life's good. You know, I it's different because like I just spent a whole week alone because my girlfriend went to Florida for a week, and so I got to just lay in bed and watch TV with no one else around and no one holding me accountable, and that's been like the first time in many years, and I didn't get high, so I made it. I passed the test because I was actually worried about it. So people just called me up and checked on me, my network. So
she had an ex-boyfriend's bed to shit on while she was down there.
Gotta
take a little trip for revenge.
So, and we'll say this and wrap up. So what would be your advice to someone new to recovery that's trying to get into a recovery house or looking for a recovery house? What advice would you give them?
Give it a shot. Stay as long as you can, and make friends with people that are trying to do the right thing. You know, get close to those people if you can. You know, make friends with them. Stay with the people that are trying to better themselves, and you will better yourself. You know, honestly, the people that are, that aren't, that people that are I can't, it's hard to say the people that are in or out because I'm one of them, but like, it's the truth. Like you got to, and I hate the saying stick with the winners. I don't like that because all of us are winners. If we're trying to get clean and stay clean, then like we're doing something, but like just stick with the people that are trying to change their lives, that have a positive outlook on life, and it will fit, fake it till it make it kind of thing. Because I had no idea what I wanted in life or any goals. I never had any of that when I came here. I was like, I'm just not going to get high today. Like, that's my goal, not to get high today. Now I want to go to Florida next month,
Right.
So it's just what it is, Just make sure your friends have goals. Honestly, that's what it is. Because if they have goals and you start to see them change into better people and start to like do real life adult things, like you start to want to do real adult life things too, instead of just going to go get high and lock yourself in a hotel with a hooker. Right.
You're going to dookie on the ex-boyfriend's bed too? All right. So yeah, recovery houses, there may be some value to them. Find one where the people are doing what looks like, the life you want to live, and stick with them and stay safe out there. Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortof.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.